welcome to World Creativity and Innovation Day Summit. 20 hours, 17 goals, one world. It's great to see everyone in the attendees box. Friedman, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jim Friedman. I am the White Family Professor of Creativity and Entrepreneurship at Miami University and the Chief Steward of World Creativity Week and World Creativity Day. It has been a very interesting week of celebrations, and we are so excited to be here for what is going to be a very exciting first opportunity this 20 hours to celebrate our 20th year of celebrating creativity as a way to make the world a better place. And I'm just so thrilled to kick this off with Abby Porter. What most people don't know is that World Creativity and Innovation Week and World Creativity and Innovation Day is significantly run by the students of Miami University. It was founded 20 years ago in Canada by Marcy Siegel, and she cared for it for many years as a grassroots effort and built a family around the world. And we moved it to Oxford, Ohio, the United States of America, 2 years ago, and the students have done a great job. Their dream this year was to go in honor of the 20th anniversary to put together a series of conversations surrounding the Sustainable Development Goals, the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. And Abby and her team have done a great job. You feeling pretty confident, Abby?
Yes, I'm very excited. It would be really cool to see everyone's work and meet everyone for face-to-face.
So what are some of the things that are going to happen over the next 20 hours?
Well, we have speakers talking about all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals. And we're really, really excited to hear from people such as students at Miami University, all the way up to CEOs of big organizations working on nonprofit Sustainable Development Goal work. So we are really excited.
You've got some exciting things coming to us from Denmark.
From Denmark, yes. I'm sorry, Denmark?
From the European animation work.
Yes. Okay, so in between each of our speakers, we are really thrilled to share with you all work from students around Europe. Dorte Nielsen, one of our advisors with World Creativity and Innovation Week and Day, has created a challenge for students in elementary through high school and around Europe, and they have created videos for the Sustainable Development Goals, introducing what they're about. So we're really excited to share those with you. Each one is about a minute long, and they'll be playing in between each speaker.
There's some great things that I had a chance to see a few minutes of coming out of Auckland, New Zealand as well.
Yes, we've got a very exciting video from the Poet Laureate of New Zealand, who is speaking about Sustainable Development Goal number 4, quality education, and many other things.
So it's a 20-hour celebration of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. What is your favorite SDG?
I'm sure my bias will come out in this entire 20-hour. We are really thrilled to recognize some of the most really great organizations working on Sustainable Development Goal number 14, Life Below Water. I myself am a scuba diver, and I am really looking forward to actually getting my dive master in about 1 month from now. So I am really passionate about SDG number 14.
You've actually done some work, SDG 14. Tell us some about that.
Yes, so after school, I'm going to work for a company called Reef Conservation International. It's in Belize, and the organization does work to clear out the invasive lionfish in the Caribbean. Invasive lionfish come from the Pacific Ocean, and the organization that I'm working for is actually training volunteers who come to their island to spear the fish and fillet them and use the meat for the locals, and use the fins for sustainable practices to create bracelets like this one. So very cool.
Very cool. Very cool. So what else are you excited about over the next 20 hours?
I think I'm most excited about seeing the diversity of all the speakers. It'll be really cool to see some of the smaller projects that organizations are working on, and some of the more intimate stories that come out of them. And then kind of the response, I'm really looking forward to seeing the response from our attendees and viewers of what they're passionate about, and how they're going to apply some of these stories to what they're doing.
So every little bit counts, huh?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of people think in terms of the really major work on SDGs, the things that make the news, but there are so many little things behind the scenes. I know, well, one of your favorites happens in St. Louis with the UN team.
Yes, absolutely. We are going to hear from a couple of high school students, which we're really excited about. Actually, on that little tiny island in Belize, my co-partner in this organization, Danielle Rubin, and I were on a scuba diving trip back in January, and ran into Andrew Newman, who is on the board of advisors for an organization called MUN Impact. And it's a bunch of high school students who are interested in Model United Nations, who are working towards, they have hub spots around the world working towards these sustainable development goals. We met with them, we met with Andrew and talked to him throughout the week with no Wi-Fi we had, and then got back and realized just how awesome their organization was, and were able to now collaborate and do a lot with them. So you'll hear from them as well.
People from all over the world are going to be here.
Yes, I think we have every continent except for Antarctica, so that'll be fun.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And wonderful. I see Holly Haggerty is coming to, is in the crowd tonight from down in Florida, and she's been supporting, as well as people all over the United States, Europe, Asia. India has sent a whole bunch of people. So you've gathered the world together to talk about creativity and innovation and how we're going to save the planet.
Yep. And everything will be recorded. So if you do miss something, because everyone has to sleep at some point during our 20 hours, maybe except for me, but we will be recording everything and putting it onto our YouTube, so you can go and not miss a beat of our entire 20 hours. So we're really looking forward to the response throughout the night and throughout tomorrow as well.
Excellent. You ready to get started?
Yes, let's start it up.
Excellent.
We're going to start with our intro video. Exciting. And now we're gonna actually play our first of the many videos from our students and elementary schools and middle schools and high schools from Europe. And you guys can see what the kids are doing over there and how they interpret the Sustainable Development Goals. This first one is about Sustainable Development Goal number 4.
We live in a world where the major problems are the result of the difference between how nature works and the way we think. Greed, Greed is what makes us think in a harmful way. It leads to overconsumption and irresponsible production, which is killing our planet. How do we finally end greed's tyranny? If we go deep to its roots, we'll find that education is the solution for accomplishing all global goals. Schools should be tasked with the ecological education of citizens, teaching them how to change our world. Laws are a great form of education as well. One law we propose is setting limits to the ecological footprint of people and companies every year. If they were to exceed these limits, they would have to pay increased taxes. Our planet has limited resources, so there should exist a balance between natural resources and how much we consume. In addition, the money from the taxes should only be used to further protect the environment. Education will make it so that we live in a world where we understand how nature works, and the way we think allows us to live in harmony.
Great. So I think we are ready to bring in our first of many speakers. Coming up first is Pat, and we are thrilled to bring him in and speak to him. Let's see, let me bring him in as a panelist.
I'm going to turn on the video now. Huh? We're on.
Okay. Hello, how I am?
How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Great. And can you tell the viewers where you are coming from?
I'm coming from Long Island, New York.
Fantastic. And what organization are you part of?
I'm actually with various organizations as far as Alzheimer's is concerned. So not a more organization, more of myself or my creativity.
Very cool. Very cool. And so you are going to be talking about the Sustainable Development Goal for good health and well-being?
Yes, I'm going to be talking about violence in early onset Alzheimer's.
Wonderful.
Caregivers are suffering and patients are suffering, and no, it never gets any play in the world, never gets into any films, and it's a really, really serious problem. So I'm kind of the caregiver guy. You know.
And I'm very interested to hear, and it sounds like a really personal story, which will touch the audience. So we are a few minutes early, but if you're ready, you're more than welcome to go ahead and start.
Okay. Let me just clear my throat. Okay, thanks, Abby. Thanks for having me at the World Creativity and Innovation Summit. It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning to those who are in one time zone. Good evening to others, I guess. And my creative offering here is my film, Ice Cream in the Cupboard. It's based on my book of the same name. The film is so unique because it addresses violent behavior in Alzheimer's, early onset Alzheimer's patients. And this part of the disease is very difficult. We see a lot of forgetfulness in that, but all the films that come out have never covered this part, which is so important. Let me give you my first example, which had to do with me and how I found out my wife at 53 years old had Alzheimer's. We had been bickering a lot, and we decided to go to Puerto Rico and maybe just have a romantic weekend, and she wasn't acting right. She seemed angry. And I said, well, we'll get down there, we'll take a breather, maybe we're working too hard. You know, let's take a breath of fresh air with each other. And we got down in Puerto Rico in the late afternoon, and we're having just about to sit down, have dinner and order dinner and everything. And I was looking over the side of the railing of this restaurant. It was up on the second floor. And I was admiring the cars that were 1952 Chevy, 1957 Ford. You know, cars last forever in those climates down there. And as I looked back, she picked up the entire plate of steak and lobster and hit me in the face with it. So I fell out of the chair behind me, hit my head on the back of the table, and she ran out of the restaurant. So the people picked me up. I didn't know what had happened. We weren't arguing. There was nothing going on. We weren't drinking at all. We just had the food delivered. So I came out of the restaurant. I went to look for her, and I saw where she was, and I started to run after her. And I caught up to her, and the police were following me as they saw me running down. There's a 6'3" Irish guy chasing a Puerto Rican woman down the street. My wife was Puerto Rican. And so I got together with her, and I tried to calm and just temporize the situation, see what I could do. I was too stunned. I didn't know what had happened. And So I got her back to the hotel, and she seemed angry in the taxi ride on the way back to the hotel. And she went to bed and laid down. This is about 6 o'clock at night, and just went to sleep. So I went out on the terrace and I was just shaking. I didn't know what had really hit me. What had happened here? And she walked out on the terrace about a half an hour later and she said, "Honey, I am starved. What are we going to eat?" And I said, "I tried that and you threw your food at me." And she said, "See, you joke around too much. I wouldn't do that for you. Why would I do that to you? You know, I love you. I wouldn't throw food at you. And by the way, what happened to the front of your shirt? It's all messed up with stuff, you know." So I was stunned. And after thinking about spending a weekend, there was no way I was going to stay. I had no idea. I was 49 years old. She was 53. And if you think Alzheimer's is the first thing that came to my mind, that's absolutely wrong. Flew back to New York the next day, tried to explain it to my family. No one understood anything. They figured we must have got a fight and I was lying about the whole thing. And then we had other incidents that kept getting worse. And she was working as a budget administrator in the local elementary school system. And so I'm thinking, if they're having trouble over there, I'm having trouble here. You know, I haven't heard anything from the school though. So she came home and she said, "I have to talk to you for a minute." And we sat down and she said, "I have a touch of Alzheimer's." I said, "Hon, isn't that like being a little bit pregnant? You know, Alzheimer's, you got it or you don't." And she said, "Yes, that's what I have." And she said, the budget's completely messed up. I put kids on wrong buses. Parents have filed charges against me because they will call in and say, "Hold my child, don't put him on the bus because I'm going to pick him up." And they were talking to Carmen when she hung up. The call didn't exist. So there were all kinds of things happening. Police were called on a couple of different issues. So with that, I just was so stunned at this. I thought it was some kind of a world record. 53 years old with Alzheimer's, come on. And I'm going back 20 years now. And then ultimately we came to find out that her name was Carmen. Her sisters, her two sisters and her brother were all diagnosed with early onset in their 50s. All four died in their 60s. And all four were violent. So that's a key point to bring out. Now, what happens to the caregiver here? We have to worry about the patient and the caregiver. And I learned early on with Carmen's doctors, after we had our first visit after the diagnosis, that this disease can claim two victims. One is the patient, the other is the caregiver. You need to take care of yourself. You need to get help. Your family has to pitch in. A lot of times it doesn't happen. There's always one primary caregiver. Especially when it's early onset, it's generally spousal. So the husband or the wife is faced with this monumental task of trying to keep this person together. And it's very difficult. They move so quickly. Just to give you an idea, and that, of course, that was my inspiration for doing the book and the movie. 4 to 4 siblings is a very rare mutation of this disease, early onset Alzheimer's. Now, recently, as early as March, and these are cases that I get involved in myself. This is why I'm very busy with this. We had a case, we had 27 inches of snow out in Pennsylvania. I think we got about 15 here on Long Island, but 27 inches out in north of Philadelphia. And an early onset patient got out of her house during that storm, maybe only dressed in her pajamas, went right out in the snow. They don't feel the cold. They don't know what to put on. She went 8 blocks from her house, became completely disoriented as to where she lived. Her caregiver, which I'm assuming may have been her husband, I don't know the back end of that story, I expect was so exhausted, was out to sleep. And when he heard her get up, he probably thought she was going to the bathroom. Instead, she walked right out the front door. He had nothing to block the way. Right? By 9:30 that morning, at 4 o'clock in the morning, she was reported missing. By 9:30, she was found dead of hypothermia in the snow. And she was just 67 years old. Now, that caregiver, I mean, I still have calls into the police because I would like to speak to that family. I know they're blaming themselves. Why didn't we do this? Why did we do that? Why did we think she wouldn't go out in the snow? There's just so much so many bases to cover. It's very difficult to cover them all. So, and in another case, there is a young man, 51 years old. His wife was 54. She had early onset. And he took his car. He was driving around 10 o'clock at night on a parkway out here on Long Island and lost control of his car and hit a tree and was killed. And I saw it in the paper. It was sad, but other than that, I didn't pay too much attention to it beyond that. And I had a call about a week later, and a woman asked me, "Mr. Moffat, don't you work with Alzheimer's disease?" And I said, "Yes, I do, with caregivers." He said, "Did you see the man that was killed on the Northern State Parkway last week?" And I said, yes, I did see that." She said, "Well, I just wanted to let you know, he's an early onset caregiver, and he hadn't slept in 3 days. He'd had more than 2 hours sleep. But he insisted on trying to go to his friend's house where he could be away from his wife and get a complete rest. That's what he wanted the most. And instead, he fell asleep at the wheel and was killed." So of course it goes down in the book, says, man lost his car, died on the expressway, closed the case, that's it, it's over. But I come to find out this was just another caregiver kind of situation that had to suffer. And his wife will suffer because of that, because they lost him. So you see what I'm really getting at here is these caregivers need this kind of a help. We really have to take care of them. We have to really give them the help they need and give them the backing. If there are families involved, they really have to be able to pitch in and say, let me do my part. Let me give that woman a chance to get her hair done. If a caregiver is a woman. And if it's a man, maybe like to go play golf. But that respite time just frees your mind up in a way that it does so much for you. So you need this respite time. And a lot of times that caregiver is just faced with this and nobody wants to help them. Everybody's your friend and says, "Oh yeah, if you need me for anything, just give me a call." Meanwhile, nobody wants to be around an early onset Alzheimer's patient. I brought in a woman that I had a caregiver because I realized that I had to keep my job. The caregivers should always keep their jobs if they do work. So, I brought in a caregiver and she seemed very nice and had worked with Alzheimer's patients before, and she was going to be with my wife for 8 hours a day. And so about the 5th or 6th day of her in the house, I was driving home from work and I saw my wife talking to a bunch of construction guys digging a hole in the street. And I stopped the car and I came over and I said, "Sorry guys, I'm sorry. My wife has early onset Alzheimer's and she really doesn't know what she's talking about." So he says, "Thank God you got here, because we were going to call the police. She seems like a nice lady, but we didn't know what to do. We've never seen anything like this. We didn't even know this even existed at that age. She looks so beautiful and she's so trim." Yeah, that's right. You do. You do look yourself, because other than that, in the inside of your brain is where things are going bad. Just then, the caregiver come running around the corner. I didn't realize that she was somewhat overweight, not in good physical condition. And when she went to the bathroom, my wife took off outside the door, and that was the end of it. She was 3 blocks away before the woman knew she was missing. So you always have to be sure to hire someone that's in good physical shape, because you have to keep up with that patient. Don't expect them to sit in a chair when you walk out of a room, because that's when they really kind of take off. Okay, so other thing like caregivers. Woman that her husband had Alzheimer's, early onset, 55 years old. And she had to go to a strip mall out here on the island. And went into the strip mall and she pulled the car in and she said, "Stay right here, I'll be right back. I just need to run in the store and pick up a lottery ticket," or whatever it was. So he just sat in the seat. She left the keys to the ignition, never thinking. She could have been tired. Maybe it's something that she never would think of doing, especially when you have an early onset patient in your car. She went in, he got behind the wheel, started up the car and took off with the car. He had an accident and went backwards into a wall and blew the gas tank up of the car and killed him. So again, here's where we know it's another patient. Using patient and caregiver, you follow the scheme the way I'm doing these things. And another one that would be important is one in Vancouver, British Columbia. Say a man that his wife had Alzheimer's early onset, and she was more in the 60s. And they were kind of reclusive. They weren't really near any main town or anything. That's just where they like to live. And he apparently took a fall down the stairs and fractured his skull. But his wife didn't know what to do. They have no idea how to dial 911. So she just kept climbing over him. He never got up. And the housekeeper came in 2 days later and found him, he was already dead. So you can see these cases. This is why I try to really talk about these here, because they're so important that we address this worldwide. This is not indigenous to the United States or North America. It is worldwide. You know, right now we have 200,000 patients early onset out of 5 million. 200,000, a little more than 200,000, are under the age of 65. Under the age of 65. That if you look at 2 or maybe 3 caregivers, that's 600,000 caregivers. You can imagine the volume of people that it takes to do this, if you can get it. Also, the caregivers, when they are working so hard and trying so hard to keep up with their loved one, they run their immune system down and they start catching all kinds of things. They get fevers and cold and flu. And the biggest one of all, and one that I actually called with a friend of mine within 5 days, is heart attack. Their whole system, they're just running and running and running and trying to keep up with this, their loved one, because they're moving around so fast, trying to get out of the building, constantly throwing things at them, you know, and then stopping and slowing down. And this is why we really need to get them some help. It's really, really a tough deal to do.
Seems like there's just countless stories that you've seen, and it does seem like it needs to be, you know, there needs to be more awareness around it, and I'm
oh, yeah.
I'm
I don't know why. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No.
I don't know why the other films, you know, which are not bad. I'm not saying they're bad films, but why they skipped this key important part. Maybe Hollywood didn't want to address it, but you know, I saw the need for it. I was just traveling on a plane with someone. Before I retired from my previous position, and he was an author. I was an author. We exchanged books. He got to LA. We were both going to LA, and he called me about a week later, and he said, "I read your book." He said, "This is a movie." He said, "Oh, listen, I know a couple of people, but that's all I can do is hook you up." And so I did meet these people and I used my 401k, used my savings, anything I could get to get this message out. My wife was only home with me 2 years because she was such a violent case. I actually, Abby, one story that I did when I got her daycare, we had an Alzheimer's daycare center here on Long Island. And I said, well, that's good. She's with professional people all day. They feed her and everything else. So I would just get her clothed and fed in the morning and showered. And then I'd pick her up after work at night. Well, this went on for about a week. And they called me up and they said, you better come over here. We need to see you right away. I said, okay, I'll be right there. And I went in and I said, what's the problem? They said, well, Carmen punched out a 90-year-old man this afternoon and bruised him up very bad. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh my God, so all this stress. And they said, we want to let you know, we're going to talk to the family, but you and us have a liability to the patient that got beat up. So we both can be sued. The family actually came to us and said, we're not taking any legal action. We understand it's disease. We heard about Carmen's case being, you know, somewhat violent, and you know, he's alive. He'll get better. His bruises will go away, and that'll be the end of it. So that's when they said to me, she has to be taken out of here. She can't stay here either. So
that very first moment that you realized and that you recognized that it was Alzheimer's, how have you seen the progression and the awareness grow throughout the years, and have you seen it, or has it been really this undiscovered issue?
Well, I mean, a lot of people know a lot more about Alzheimer's now, but it's gotten more of attention at least in the United States that I see, as far as caregiving is concerned. You know, they're more able to identify these cases now. And don't forget, there are some mixture of different cases and different types of dementia, as they call them now. Sometimes they just say dementia. A famous case is Robin Williams, famous actor, comedian, one of my true favorites. A lot of people really don't know that he hung himself, he committed suicide, but what drove him to that was a dementia, and it was called Lewy body's disease. And Lewy body's disease creates this massive amount of craziness that goes on in your hallucinations of things coming at you all the time. Plus, he was severely depressed. He had problems with drugs, and that Lewy body's dementia pushed him over the top, and he killed himself. I mean, that's another type of dementia. You know, Alzheimer's is another type of dementia, the biggest one. But there are other types, and a couple of baseball players recently died of Alzheimer's, and football players, there may be a connection to football players and being hit in the head so frequently, and years later they start having problems. So it's an interesting subject, and it's one that really has to continue to get attention.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's very touching, your stories. And let me ask you one more question, and that
Sure.
is what have you seen, you know, that could maybe be in the future something that contributes to this, and something that does. It seems like this fits very well into the good health and well-being sustainable development goal. What innovations and what things have you seen that could potentially solve this part of that?
Well, there are a number of things out now, or at least being tested. There is no cure, of course. The only medications that we know, I think, are 2, and they are only meant to slow down the disease. And in the case of early onset, the disease often moves faster than the drug can to help them. So it doesn't become, there are tons of studies going on where certain foods, it might be best to avoid them, what you should eat to build up your system, to build up your immune system, to keep your mind going, which, you know, I tell a lot of people that retire that, you know, when you retire, don't sit in front of the TV watching quiz shows all day. You know, get out, read something, do Sudoku, do crosswords, keep your mind active. The problem with early onset, and the problem with common in our case especially, early onset is often genetic, and there's nothing that you can do. There's not one fruit or apple or orange, that anything in your body that's going to help. That is going to run you right over. And that's the difference.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like many other diseases, you know, treat yourself well, stay exercised, eat well when you can, and do what you have to do to stay active and alert. But other than that, that's about it.
And what about in the caregiver space? Have you seen anything popping up in that area where, you know, as you mentioned, even just a day where you get to go golfing or something like that? Have you seen anything that might relieve the caregiver?
Yes, there's an interesting one here on Long Island, which I love. Of course, Carmen was too violent to get into it, but I support it financially, and I do speak there as well. And that is a center where you can bring your loved one during the day. It's free. They're all professional on this disease, on early onset, and you can take off for 3 or 4 hours. You know, so they have like maybe 3 days a week. So I try to get them funded a little more so they get an extra day, because there's a lot of patients to be taken care of. And of course, the patients are a handful. It takes probably one caregiver to watch each of these patients when they're in the care of this facility. So that's good to see. And I understand that's starting to spread, you know, quite well. Actually, when I was in Dublin, Ireland, I visited the Alzheimer's Society in Dublin, Ireland. Great people. I love them. And they had a beautiful facility where you could bring your loved one for 2 or 3 days. And it was, you know, 28 euros per day, you know, a very low amount. That would be nice to see the caregiver be able to get that here. That's the kind of break they need. A weekend to take that breather, to go away for a little bit. Now, the only thing that took care of my wife was antipsychotic drugs in the end. And those cannot be administered at home. So I had no choice. I had to put her to 24/7 care.
Wow.
But there's nice things happening with caregivers.
Yeah.
We're getting there.
Well, thank you very much for coming and sharing your story. It's
My pleasure.
very touching and moving, and I hope that we see more of this, and this awareness grows, and that your stories get you know, bigger, because this is very important. So
Ice Cream in the Cupboard will teach you a lot. It really will. So it's a good learning film.
I will look for it. I'll watch it. I will look for it.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you very much, Pat.
Okay. Good night, all.
Good night. Up next, we are going to play our second video of the students. And let's see if we can get that up here. The second video we will play. Created in Belgium.
In Mr. Guillaume, kids get into motion. Girls and boys will be equal. In the West, people are complaining.
Il, elle, de, same.
We say il or elle when we speak about a group of girls and boys. The Prime Minister is thinking. We can choose between elles and his. Boys and girls are happy. In the East. I love shorts. Beautiful dress. I look awesome. I feel great.
Dress and short for all.
To an equal world and beyond.
Yeah, right.
So that's about SDG number 5, gender equality, and those kids created that wonderful video for us to describe that.